At the Massacre of Glencoe, the Campbells broke the code of Highland honour and committed murder under trust. But if you thought Glencoe was bad, then what happened here was worse. And once again, it was the Campbells. Or was it? If you're interested in the people, places and events in Scottish history, then click the subscribe button at the bottom right of the screen and ring the notification bell to be told when I upload new videos. In the meantime, let me tell you a story. I'm in Dunoon. Now, I'm here because I was performing my live show in the Dunoon Borough Halls last night. The next nearest will be in Glasgow on the 21st of September, and there'll be a link top right and in the comments for that and all my upcoming live shows wherever you are in the world. The horrific events that happened here were the culmination of centuries of clan feuding. These are the remains of Toward Castle, 8 miles south of Dunoon. It saw what must be the worst atrocity in the history of Highland feuds, and yet nobody talks about it. It was a seat of Clan Lamont, one of the oldest clans who could trace their name all the way back to Fergus MacEirk. Their seat had originally been up in Dunoon, but we'll come back to that. They tell me that the castle here was very grand and well appointed. We'll never know for sure. You see, in May 1646, while the chief of the Lamonts was at home here and others were at their castle Askog further west, the Campbells arrived and laid siege to both. After a while, on the 1st of June, they brought up artillery and started pounding the castle relentlessly. After 2 days, Sir James, the Clan Lamont chief, could see that prospects weren't good. Now, the two clans had taken opposing sides in the War of the Three Kingdoms. English Civil War. But when Charles I had handed himself over to the Campbell-supported Covenanters at the beginning of May, the Lamonts had put down their arms and retired to their two castles here in Cowal. Now, on the 3rd of June, Sir James Lamont sent word from Toward Castle here along to Askog Castle to say that he was surrendering to the Campbells and that they should do so too. Sir James signed an agreement along with 7 Campbell leaders, whereby the Lamonts were granted indemnity in person and estate, with power to pass freely where they pleased. But as soon as the submissive Lamonts opened the castle doors, the Campbells plundered them utterly and laid waste to all the Lamonts' lands and possessions. Both Toward and Askog castles were burned to the ground. You can feel the trauma in the ruins that are left here. You can almost hear the screams of the women and children as they died. The Lamonts were put on boats and taken up the coast to Dunoon. As the Lamonts disembarked homeless and stripped of valuables, they must have been angry, bitter, desolate even, hating their Campbell tormentors and wondering how and where they would rebuild their lives. They needn't have worried. This memorial commemorates the events that took place here. 36 gentlemen of the name of Lamont were hung from a tree just opposite, but that was just the start of it. As the rest of the Lamonts stood watching in horror, the Campbells descended on them, stabbing with dirks, and they and their clansmen dangling from ropes were thrown into a pit, whether dead or alive, and the earth was shovelled on top of them. As some bled and others gasped for breath, they slowly choked on the dirt at what had become Campbell land, and they buried them alive. Over 200 were killed this way. Whatever the horrors of Glencoe, It didn't come close to this. Was it just that the Campbells are more wicked than others? Should we judge them more harshly? Remember what I said at the start. The horrific events that happened here were the culmination of centuries of clan feuding. Sometime before the massacre, as the war between royalists and Covenanters raged, the Lamonts were committed royalists. But when their powerful Campbell neighbours saw this, the Campbell Marquis of Argyll forced Sir James Lamont to recant his views and take the side of the Covenanters. Resentment simmered. And when the Campbells and their allies were defeated by royalist forces at the Battle of Inverlochy, the Lamonts, who'd been compelled to stand with the Campbells in that battle, took their opportunity. They descended on Dunoon and laid waste to Campbell lands. They destroyed the grain house and drove off 340 cattle and horses. They also killed 33 Clan Campbell men, women and children. When they laid siege to the Tower of Kilmoon north of Dunoon, they promised that garrison their lives if they surrendered. But the prisoners were taken 3 miles along the road begging for their lives, and there they were brutally murdered. So it was the Lamonts that started it. Now, I tend not to do much on clan histories. The reason for that is that I get the impression that it's not really what Scots are interested in. I think the non-Scots get much more excited about clans, and there's a really good guy called Clint Edwards who does the Scottish Clans podcast. He's worth looking up. To help me know what you want from this channel, tell me in the comment section if you're Scottish or if you're international, and whether or not you want clan stories. Or, for that matter, what broad topics are of most interest. Anyway, I said that the feud had lasted for centuries. In 1472, Clan Campbell managed to gain a charter for the lands around Dunoon. They turned what had previously been Lamont lands and the castle that stood on that hill into a Campbell stronghold. 30 years earlier, Sir Duncan Campbell had been conveying the body of his recently deceased son, and he was taking it back to Campbell territory. But heavy snowfall had made highland paths impassable. He'd asked if his son could be buried on Lamont ground. The chief of Clan Lamont granted this service, and the son was buried here at Kilmun. After the favour had been granted, the Campbells built a church on the site, and it turned into a Campbell burial place. So it was the Campbells that did it after all. Back in 1400, Robert III was in residence at Rothsay Castle in the Isle of Bute. On a beautiful spring day, some of his courtiers had crossed into Lamont lands whilst out hunting. When they saw 3 beautiful, unprotected young Lamont women, the nature of their hunt changed. They pursued the women, caught them, and raped them, leaving the women to run home to tearfully tell their horrific tale. Needless to say, the Lamonts sent out for revenge, and when they caught up with the king's men, they brutally killed them before they got back to the safety of Rothsay Castle. When the king found out, his punishment was to take 8 square miles of Lamont lands in Strathechig, where you'll find the beautiful Puck's Glen. He gave it to the Campbells. So who started the feud? Was it King Robert? Was it his courtiers? Was it the Lamonts? Was it the Campbells? An even greater slight in the Lamonts had been in 1371, when the first Stuart king, Robert II, came to the throne. Robert II was the first king to come after the Scottish Wars of Independence with England. So it goes without saying that his family had been close to the Bruces. They'd married into them, for goodness sake. But But not every family or clan had supported Robert the Bruce. Remember, that was a period of division in Scotland. Bruces and Cummins, the Contender and Balliol. The Laments, along with the MacDougals, had chosen the wrong side. The Campbells had chosen the Bruces. Before the Wars of Independence, the Lament chief had sat in Dunoon. When the dust had settled on that terrible period of conflict and Robert II became the first Stuart king, he appointed Sir Colin Campbell, the hereditary keeper of Dunoon Castle. That was the start of the feud and the Lament's decline at the expense of the Campbells. So a massacre that took place at the end of the 17th century English Civil War had its roots in the 13th century fight for independence. It wasn't the Campbells, it wasn't the Laments, it was the English who did it. Don't you see? It was obvious all along. The world's in harmony and everything makes sense again. Let's be honest, we've got no idea what other feuds or atrocities might have taken place if the players on the chessboard had been arranged differently. But in this tale, there's a warning to us all. When we view political differences with anger and squabbles turn to violence, you can never know where it's going to end. It has to be said that whether it was the MacDonalds, the Laments, or the MacGregors, the Campbells had a way of coming out of the violence with more land. If you'd like to know about the Campbells' involvement with the fall of the MacGregor clan, there's a video coming up on screen now. Give me a thumbs up if you can and support the channel by clicking top right to become a Patreon member. Buy me a coffee in the description below. Ha mi an dóchas gwn be lama life. Cherry and asta.